All right, everybody. Welcome to another Tinker Tribe podcast. And I am joined today by Chuck and Chad. We got to chat for a good bit at the latest Exit and Build conference. And I've known Chad since back in 2019 when we met in Arkadelphia. And it was cool getting to see him out there at Exit and Build and get to chat about Voluntaria, about the community that you guys have going on. And so welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. So yeah, you guys were there at Exit and Build, and you currently are working on this community Voluntaria, and so I'd like to start off with getting to know a little bit more about your genesis. Like, what is your origin story? So, if you guys maybe could give me a little bit of a background on like how you found your way towards starting this thing, and what was kind of the your I guess awakening to what is really going on with the world and looking deeper into things and finding yourself where you're at right now. Whoever wants to go
Go
first.
ahead first, Chad. I'll follow you up.
Okay, sounds good. So I lived in an intentional community in California for 2 years from like 2013 to 2015. And what I found out there took me a while because I wasn't a voluntarist at that point. I was kind of just ambivalent to politics or anything like that. And back then it wasn't as egregious as it is now. So it was easy to just ignore it all. Well, after living there for a while, I realized they were communists. It was the community first, and then it was the individual. And I came to firmly believe it should be the other way around. Like it should be, you got to take care of your own stuff, and then you come to the community and you give of your surplus. If you're starving, you got nothing to give to the community. So when I left there, I thought, man, they had a lot of stuff that really worked well, and they had a few things that didn't work well. And then after I was out for about a year, I had this massive epiphany, and I thought, oh my God, if you just applied voluntarism, the non-aggression principle, and natural law to what they were doing, that would fix all the problems that they had. So then that's kind of what I set out to do. I built a little website. I was looking for people. And at the same time, Chuck and some other guys were working on what they were working on. And then that started with a bang, and it ended with a very quick bang too. And we have come to find out through a really interesting book that talks about communities is 90% of them fail within the first 5 years, and this one did too before I joined it. And then the super short version is it fell apart due to people problems, like most of them do.
Okay.
And I went back to Chuck and I said, hey, I think we can make this thing work. Look what I've laid out. Look what I realized where I lived. And we're both really hardcore voluntarists, and we think a lot alike in that regard. So if we just made these adjustments to what I've already learned, we could have something that would work. And Chuck and another gentleman that's in on this process with us too, he prefers to not be public at this point. So we'll abstain from mentioning his name, but he's a great voluntarist too. And they were just like, we're over it. It's a people problem, and we're just going to sell it. And I was like, we should try to pick the pieces up. And they're like, we're going to sell it. And they tried to sell it, and it fell through twice. And then I just kept coming back going, let's try it. And finally they said, all right, let's try it. And so here we are. That was 2023, so a couple of years ago. And they bought it in 2021. And just, like it started, and Chuck can go into as much detail as he wants to about that. It started, and then it exploded and then imploded, and then it was just vacant for a bit. And then I kind of moved out to the property and got the pump going again. The well was shot. That house was not in good repair. There's one permanent dwelling here there's a barn and a house that we're slowly transitioning into becoming this like communal house. It's got a big kitchen, and it's really, really laid out quite nicely for that. So we're working on that. I got all that working, and it was functional within about 2 or 3 months of me joining the project. And we've had a few different peace festivals out here. We're partnered up with Wayne at peacefestivalusa.com, and those have been really fun. We've gained a bunch of connections there. We have a pole barn that we're converting into an event center, so we'll be able to do full-blown events out here and everything. So it's really coming along.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess if I may follow up.
Yeah.
Did you have any other questions or for Chad, before I dive in?
No, go ahead, Chuck.
Okay. So yeah, and I guess the only thing that I would add to what he said is, there's a few things that we've learned, or at least I've learned, and I think that we've talked about, in terms of that. But one of the main things that we lean on quite a bit is our Voluntaria principles. But
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've discovered, and maybe we haven't talked about this openly, but there is a presumption that there is a certain kind of person who's going to align with those principles. And the principles don't tell us what you should and shouldn't do. They're just guidelines for behavior. And they don't tell you what you should value. They assume that we value similar things, like, freedom and autonomy and improvement and morality and truth and those kinds of things. So excuse me, we don't talk about those things specifically in there, but I think that we do leverage them quite a bit. And I don't know if it's worth reading them through, but anybody can check them out at voluntaria.community. And with that, we are using them in our conversations and leveraging them in our vetting processes and learning more about how to vet people. And I gotta be honest, like I'm sure Chad knows better than I. It's been a kind of painful process, because most people don't fit, and that's how it is. I think when you're hiring for a job, most people don't fit. And
when you're looking to date, most people don't fit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're living, we're not living on top of each other in a shared facility or anything, but we have, people staying in their own RV or tiny house kind of thing, and then we have the community house. So you're spending a lot of time together. So it is there is overlap with the whole dating relationship thing, and if it's not a good vibe, it's not a good vibe.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you get into the question of what does like an intentional community that works actually mean, and I think we're kind of discovering that. But again, I think it's rooted in some shared values in entrepreneurialism, peace and moral behavior, truth and alignment with truth, honesty, behaving with integrity. Those kinds of things are expectations, and we are building a practice of invoking those expectations, in our principles. I know Chad's been doing like regular meetings with the people who do live on site, and kind of going through and demonstrating successes and failures with the alignment of the principles in behavior that's happening at the day-to-day there. So I think that's been very helpful. But I think that there is something to be said, and actually this podcast is one of the reasons I think that we need to kind of establish ourselves. We need to start getting this message out there in some way, because Chad's been doing a lot of work individually vetting and individually interviewing and inviting people to stay on the land and getting to know them very deeply. And I think that what we need to do is start branching out and reaching out and filtering highly qualified people.
Okay, so Chad, you were in a lot of different communities before, but Chuck, what got you interested in wanting to do this? To get started with this.
So without disparaging anybody except for my ex-wife, she and I at the time were very gung-ho on building an intentional community. We connected through not she and I, but we connected with some other people who of those people, now one remains and prefers to remain anonymous. So Chad and I are partners of two of the three partners.
Okay.
And the reason I share all that is just because, like Chad said, there was a tumultuous kind of splitting of the original 5 people, actually 6, who kind of bought in together and
Okay.
purchased the land. One person basically kind of washed out because he was not able to kind of keep up with the lifestyle on the land. And we were building a garden and doing all kinds of things, and that was just, it was a capacity and skill and capability kind of issue. There were medical issues, so he kind of washed out. And then shortly after that, it was exposed or discovered that my ex-wife and one of the other partners were developing emotions for each other, and that broke up our relationship. And I did not anticipate that at all. And so that was, a very painful and stressful loss, especially since I've been through like a foreclosure before and another divorce prior to that were closely related. So this was, it looked like a pattern to me that I was kind of repeating in something, not vetting my wives or something. As far as I know, there was no cheating involved, but that's essentially the reason that kind of broke up. And Chad came in and was interested. I should say, the 5 of us, 6 of us, we bought with the intention of building an intentional community. That was the whole idea. We had plans. We were doing ceremonies together. We were talking about what we were going to build, how we were going to divide the land, and we all had shared reasons for investing in the land, but different nuanced purposes. Somebody wanted to do what do you call it, farmsteading, or, where you herd cattle or farm or goats and
Right,
those kinds of
right.
things. Breed chickens and ducks and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to have it as like a retreat and getaway. And while initially it was my primary residence, I had intended to kind of grow out of that and have that as like a retreat camp getaway kind of thing.
Okay.
And it's always been that way. And whereas other partners wanted to live on the land full time in their RVs and really just kind of make that their lifestyle of gardening and food forestry and nature life, and that sort of thing. And so we had disparate reasons, but they were all aligned in that the land was key, and developing the land in a natural food forest and compatible way, kind of creating a gated or protected community of like-minded people was the main goal. And Chad basically was in contact with us the whole time. We had many events where my then wife and Chad and many groups of people would hang out at his house and go on boating rides and things like that for years. And this is one of the things that I think we've kind of discovered over the past 2 to 3 years of like really intentionally trying to build our community. It seems like the vetting process needs to be a certain length of time. I don't know exactly how long that is, but
yeah,
Chad and myself and Kevin shared values, but we also share the goals of unity, and we align with the Voluntaria principles. But we've been friends now for many years, many of us. And
okay,
I
so
think
you guys have known each other for quite a while.
yeah, Chad and I had kind of known each other or run into each other or interacted with each other for several years before this
I think it
ever
was
happened.
Anarchapulco 2018.
Where we first met, yeah. And we actually roomed
okay.
together, just serendipitously,
Just by like reaching out before the event and just
Exactly, yeah. And that was the
connecting.
year I spoke on behalf of Dash Cryptocurrency at Anarchapulco, and we split a room there, and it was a good time. But
cool.
yeah, we were very much aligned in a lot of ways there, and nobody's perfect, but we have maintained a friendship, through
Right.
a lot of different kinds of events since then. So yeah, it's been, we and Chad and I, we have been able to work things out when we have, conflicts or disagreements. And I think that that's something that is inherent to humanity in general. Like, I'm witnessing and seeing and believing more and more that humans seem to grow through conflict. And I think that that's the dividing line between whether or not you're going to be successful in this community or not. Do you believe that conflict divides, or do you believe that conflict can be overcome and unite? And that's
unless you're a politician, then you just start wars.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
that's the thing. They use the word conflict in war, and that's a problem. That's a fundamental problem.
Conflict resolution instead of peace, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so. This is a really good point. Is like, you guys mentioned the principles, and is just sharing the principles like good enough, or does there have to be like the big vision for the thing, or
here's what I've found. They need to be everywhere, and you need to talk about them all the time. They're stuck. Oh, we have 2 fridges here. I've stuck them on both fridges. There's one in the bathroom. I mean, it just has to be in front of you all the time because it's so easy to just slip out. Like the last one is one of my favorite ones, which is resolve disputes honorably. I mean, if you have a dispute, it's like, just don't be an ass about it. Like, figure out how to resolve it honorably. And that's tough sometimes. So
yeah,
if you constantly remind people that this is what you're here to do, then it really does seem to help.
okay.
And I want to piggyback on that. One other thing that I've realized over the course of this and doing this for the last couple of years is that culture is everything. So I think at the end of the day, to simplify what we're doing here is we're really trying hard to build a new culture. And my example is Japan. In Japan, hardly any kids steal bicycles.
Right.
Because if you did, the other kids wouldn't hang out with you because that's just like a no-go in that culture. So you don't have to really worry about locking your bike up very much. And I mean, I'm sure they have some problems, but most of the culture goes along with this. And it's like, if you look at the Amish, they have a culture, and every country on the planet has its. I lived in Thailand for a couple of years. Their culture is very different than our culture. And so what if you could create your own culture? And I think that's what the principles do, is they bring people together. And when they come in here, we show them the principles. They're always seen them by the time we start talking to them, and they like it. And everybody's like, oh, yeah. But then when something happens, you point them back to the principles, and then they kind of get it. They're like, oh, wow, yeah, like I didn't do that, and I should have done that. And then that becomes the culture. And people don't have these blowout fights, and they resolve their disputes honorably, and they start doing this stuff. If we can build that culture, that's how we win. And if you don't want that culture that we're espousing here, then there's plenty of places you can go. Just look outside. Just go to any big city. They don't have this culture. So we're really trying to impart that on people. I go back to the Amish. I don't know that much about Amish, but they seem like they've got a lot of things handled. And I think it's because they all have the same values, and they all seem to have the same culture, and then they all seem to get along. Probably not all the time, but a lot better than most of the people outside of there do.
Well, you're right,
Yeah.
and frankly, the way that I look at it is, so everything Chad has said is true. Yes, and I think what the Amish get right is, yes, values, but also they essentially banish people if they don't agree.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
They get voted off the island.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. It's like, starts with an R. It's not Ramadan. That's something else. But there's Rumsfeld or some kind of event.
Oh, they do the Rumspringa, which
Yeah.
is like they give you the ability to go out into the world, I think, and then you get to make the choice. Do you want to come back and be part of this the Amish community, or do you want to be in the world and into the wide world?
Right. And my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding is, the most rigid of the Amish, once you make the choice to go out in the world, coming back is either an ordeal or not an option.
Yeah,
basically.
Well, in the way we're working though with the world and the people that are in the world right now, they've if we're talking to them, they've probably already seen that they don't like it. They don't like how it operates out there.
Right.
And if you come in here, the hope, the promise is that it's going to be a lot different, and you're not going to have a lot of those issues that you had out there.
I saw the website, in one part that stood out to me, because I talk about this a lot on the podcast, is like, the only way to win the game is to stop playing. I think that was in there from a quote from the movie War Games or something like that. And that's, I feel like, if we can't come together somehow and create an alternative, then there's chaos and everybody's going to look for some answer, right? And if they have no replacement, then somebody that comes in with the leader that comes in with the solution is, you're going to fall into that, I think.
Exactly. This is so, like, I want to say I'm a hobby psychologist, and I think that there's a lot of psychology, human psychology, evolutionary psychology, group dynamic psychology. Like, there's a bunch of different perspectives that need to be, I think, taken into account here. And again, that's why we try to boil these things down into principles. And it is my understanding from my own, like, motivational research and managing dozens or hundreds of people over my career as a software developer of different kinds of mindsets, that the expectations must be clear up front, so that people have the opportunity to opt in willingly, because a challenge willingly faced is always received differently at the mental and even hormonal level. There's the data to back this up, that a challenge willingly faced is received and achieved more likely and as a better experience than a challenge unwillingly received, unknowingly received. And so, when people are surprised by expectations, that's the worst possible scenario. You have to know that the expectation is upfront, that you will do no harm, that you will be kind and compassionate and generous, that you will love yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, we're going to try to exemplify what that looks like. We're not perfect either, but this is where we're aiming, And my hope is that every temporary guest resident, honorary member, everybody who's a part of Voluntaria, whether they're a volunteer or an event attendee on the property, they are aware of the principles, and especially if they're a member, they have verbally agreed to each one and had an opportunity to ask their questions about what this means, if they do have any questions. We haven't made it that rigid yet, but we are adding these into our contracts for residency, as a, for instance, our contracts for membership. So it's something that I think needs to be infused at all levels, so that it is a cultural life. That's the only way that this is going to, like, continue on. Again, some of my motivational and productivity research from entrepreneurial realms, building the culture of any community, whether it's a business, a church, or a family, the expectations and the values must be exemplified and presented at all times.
And I would add one thing to that, is they need to be reminded constantly, because we can't forget that they're coming out of the world, and the world does not operate like this.
That's what I was about to ask, is that, a lot of folks, in our society have a lot of trauma, just, going through the mind programming that everybody's gone through in their lives, living in our modern society that we live in now, that we have, like, even if you probably had a stable environment, you still have all this, like, a programming on you for how we operate in our normal society. And, a lot of that, our US culture really is like, everybody's like cloistered and separated from each other, right? I was talking to some guys that we do a Sunday night live stream, and one of the guys is an older guy, John, and he was talking about, when people stop going around and talking to their neighbors, was when AC became a big deal, because AC kept you inside, and then the TV kept you entertained.
Wow.
And so, it used to be the norm, right? Where people were a lot more connected with each other. But our society has grown into this, like, very much we're separated from each other kind of thing.
Yep.
And
yeah. And you're tapping into something there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the trauma thing. I mean, number 9, we have 10 principles. Number 9 is teach sound principles, love the children, recognize, address, and resolve your traumas. So basically, like having people acknowledge that they have traumas, and your trauma is your homework. I mean, we all have them to one degree or another, and they will kick your ass. So we really encourage people to look at that kind of stuff. And sort it out for themselves and get in a better place so that it doesn't, rear its ugly head later on and cause you a problem.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like, so I was having this conversation with Nicole Sauce. She was on the show a couple weeks ago, and talking about how people run into escape society. Sometimes they're just looking for an escape. And part of that process, I guess, is like, how do you heal somebody that's in that mode of, like, just being internally broken, probably, and just looking for that escape, and like looking for this community to maybe latch onto and just maybe become a vampire in that thing, because they don't have something that they've dealt with, right?
Yeah, it's basically, personal growth stuff. And on our application, when people apply to live here, we have a bunch of questions. We kind of want to know, what have you done? Have you been involved in Anthony Robbins? Are you aware of Byron Katie and her work? Have you done anything at, Landmark Education? I mean, there's a million options out there, and so many of them are really great. I've done a bunch myself, and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy now that I was, 15, 20 years ago by any stretch. And I could say unequivocally, I would not be able to do what I'm doing now without that background. And when you look out and you look at the world and you look at the people that are doing this, I mean, there's some folks that I know that are doing a community, and I just scratch my head because I know some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I don't think it's going to work, because I think there's trauma in there that's not going to let it work. And in my personal opinion, it hasn't been dealt with, and it's just a ticking time bomb at that point.
Yeah, and I want to say we're not here to rescue anybody,
Okay.
But we're not, completely unaware of, our own brokenness, but and we're not perfect either. So
right,
it's these guidelines are there for anybody to point out. We don't have a proprietary ownership over these things. These are for others to point at us and say, hey, you're not aligning with the being integrous and communicating clearly when you did this, and then we can reflect and say, oh yeah, you're right, that solid thing that we both value, I did not exemplify that in that sense, or maybe I thought I was, and thank you for pointing that out. That's, I think, part of the nature of being social creatures, and I know that most of the normalized Western society is craving authenticity, and I think that the authenticity in connectedness, in community, is something that is actively being removed from our society at all levels, man to woman, race to race, old to young, rich to poor. All stratifications of society are being further and further divided, like the universe is accelerating in its expandedness, right? it's incredible how effective I think those collections of, I don't know what you would call them, like destructive mentalities have been on our society that come from these institutions like the WEF and things like that. And I don't want to get all big, high and mighty and like sound like I'm all preachy. The bottom line is, there is a hunger for connectedness and community. And Chad has it. I have it. We've always had it. We're doing something about it, and we want to, connect with people who will also want to do something about it. And we're open to what that something looks like. We think it looks something like living together in harmony and peace, and not being stressed, and not having your value taken away by your community, by your government, and being able to contribute in a reciprocal way, not as a slave, but as a participating, owning member of something that is bigger than you,
Yeah. So a lot of people have the idea of doing something like this. What was the thing that, but the big difference is somebody taking the actions. So what was the moment that it was like, all right, we're taking the action to move forward with this?
Well, from my perspective, it was, when the first thing fell apart, we had put the property on the market. I figured, hey, the thing is disbanded. Let's just end it. Let's sell it. And we had a couple opportunities come up. And in those opportunities, after they had both fallen through, Chad was like, hey, give me an opportunity to come in and I'll buy those two out and let's make it work. Let's do this community. And, I was and still am the skeptic, at least. Chad is very positive in that way, and he's like, no. So we made an agreement that he would live on site, be the project manager, run the day-to-day, and the three of us would continue to pay the note on the property and support whatever entrepreneurial or community activities that we could do together.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess for me it was, I lived in one, and there was a lot of great stuff about it. I mean, just from the practical stuff, like we're here now, we've got 52 acres. Well, guess how many lawnmowers we have? We have one. Like
one?
This whole property, and you don't need, I mean, if this was subdivided into 52 parcels and there were 52 people here, like the way the world works out there would probably be 52 lawnmowers here, right? But we just have one, so you don't need to have 52. And it's the same thing with a communal kitchen. We have 2 refrigerators, and people can use different things. And you just, when you give up needing all of your own stuff, it becomes the life becomes simpler. You don't need as much stuff, and the community can have the thing. I mean, we have one tractor, but we need to upgrade it, so it's going to get sold, and at some point we'll end up with another one. But we'll just have one tractor for 52 acres. We don't. Not everybody needs their own tractor. Not everybody needs their own event center, right? We're going to have an event center. Like, who has access to an event center?
Right.
Well, that lives here and wants to do something and do their own event, yoga class or whatever, just talk to us about it and we'll talk about it, and it'll probably work. If, as long as it's not harming anyone else. I mean, do no harm is our first thing, right? Well, and if it can bring in money, we're all for it. If it, some of that can go to the community, just like if you went out in the world and you rented a yoga studio, you would pay for the yoga studio, so a percentage would go in. So there's all kinds of entrepreneurial opportunities here. You just need to come up with one and a decent plan and then pitch it to us. So I'll be like, okay, that sounds good. Do you need some help? How can we help you? And the other thing I wanted to mention, that I just love this concept, and I got it from where I lived. Imagine living in a place where there's 10 or 20 people, and they're all your friends. You move into this place and they're your friends. Well, what if your default state was, when someone proposed something, they said, hey, we should do yoga every Sunday afternoon? Well, what if your first knee-jerk reaction was, sure? Like, if that person that's suggesting it is your friend, then I could say confidently, I want all my friends to have whatever they want. And if I can help them, I'm all ears. So imagine living with other people that was their default state. Now, if you had something going on every Sunday and it was going to conflict with you in the event center, you might be like, hey, wait a minute. But if you don't, and there's absolutely no reason to say no, why would you say no? So imagine living in a communal situation where people want you to have what you want to have. And then there's other people that are going to help you. And there's other people that might even partner with you on that business thing that you're talking about. I mean, it's just a great way to live. It's a great culture to be in, and it's phenomenal. And it's so hard to talk to people about it because it's so far out of the norm of how people think. Because almost everybody out there exists from it's a no until it's a yes. Until you can absolutely 100% convince me, then it's a no. And we're trying to spin that around and be like, all right, well, if we're all friends here and it's all great and we're all groovy and we're all like one big family, of course I want you to have what you want, Greg. What do you want? And then as long as it doesn't involve, a garbage dump in what's my front yard of my little area that's going to adversely affect me, then I'm going to be like, let's do it, Greg. Have a good time.
So Chuck, you mentioned that Chad kind of operates as like the project manager. Like, in Chad, do you think that it's pretty important for somebody that wants to do something like this to have some kind of like somebody that's going to be the guy that's operating the thing and has the vision and keeps the principles and stuff like that? Like, what do you guys think about that aspect of doing something like this?
My advice would be just come join us because it's a lot of work.
Well, yeah. I want to I feel like there could be some holes in the minds of your audience in that it sounds beautiful and all airy fairy, but a disagreeable person is gonna be like, yeah, but what if you da 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 da, there's all kinds of holes that could be shot in what Chad just said. And the way that we cover all of those holes is with the one alternative way of managing people that nobody ever talks about, which is consensus agreement. And it's basically most people don't understand that there are only 3 ways for groups of people to organize meaningfully and manage each other. We're very familiar with the democratic process where you have 1 vote per nose, right? Everybody gets a vote. And by the way, the United States is not a democratic society. It's a republic, which means you have representation, right? So that's important. That's an important distinction. And then at the very highest level of representation, you have the most detached people making decisions on your behalf. So and because of that, the way that democracy works, it ends up being a rule by mob. So
right.
The 51% rule over the 49%, and that creates a lot of dissatisfaction. Ultimately, it's going to create division and factions. So that's the democratic method. Another method is the hierarchical method, which often degenerates into tyranny. In the best case scenarios, you have a benevolent king, but that usually ends with the king, and the children or the successors end up being spoiled brats and manipulating and thinking that it's okay to destroy the society. And that's how that typically ends. But what people don't often talk about is consensus. And the reason that consensus works better is that it's not rule by mob, because everybody must agree. Now we have a consensus team, and we're opening up. Anybody can become a level 1 member or level 4 member, depending on how you look at it. We have some guidelines and instructions, and these are all on our website. You can go look at them. But the membership guidelines break down some membership levels, and at the highest level is the owner operator level, where myself and Chad and our other partner are. And we make up now the consensus team. We have several people who are interested in joining us at that level, but we have a financial commitment and a contractual commitment to activate at that level, right?
Okay.
And also a responsibility to the note on the property. So
right.
So that would be the highest level, and then every level beneath that, we have, more and more or less and less privileges and access to resources and things like that. But it ultimately boils down to who controls and decides the resources and the property of the community. Ultimately, the consensus team makes the final decision, but as Chad has alluded to, everybody is welcome to make a proposal to the consensus team. provided that the only rule of the proposal is that it's good for the consensus team. So. And so either you can be a part of the consensus team and make proposals, or you can be any level of membership, including some random person off the street who's going to make a proposal to the consensus team. And that's basically how we operate. We have a 501c3 from a structural perspective, and so we can contract and lease the land and do all kinds of, we can make long-term contracts and make agreements and commitments and things like that. So we're in a pretty good position, I think, to engage with the world while, inviting in people who align with these ideas and are willing to experiment with us,
So you mentioned the membership thing. So does, like, if somebody was interested in coming out there to check out what the community is like, you said there's like different tiers of membership that you can become involved with it, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And different tiers entitle you to different levels of access and rights. At the most remote level, we have the temporary guest resident, where you can stay on the land for,
So that would be like a recreational kind of thing or something like that?
Yeah, you can come park an RV.
To come and visit for a little bit or something?
Yep, for a period of time, and then you could, you would sign a temporary guest resident contract. There would be some negotiated period of time where you could stay for free. If you wanted to extend that period of time, we would negotiate for a monthly rental.
Okay.
What we really like to talk about, those are safe harbor membership, which what that is, we'll clear a spot for you with a brush hog, so it's nice and flat, and it's kind of jungly out here. There's all kinds of trees. It's a piece of property, 52 acres. We've got a 50-foot cliff in Florida, if you can believe that.
Florida?
Yeah.
A cliff?
We've got a pond.
I know, right? Yeah.
a 3/4 acre pond that we need to get somebody out here that knows about fish and start growing some fish in there. But we'll clear a spot for you for your tiny house, for your tent, for your RV, for your car, whatever. And in the event of an economic collapse, another COVID lockdown or whatever, we could become your plan B, right? You're just like, hey, guys, I need to get out of LA. It's nuts here now. Well, if you're a Safe Harbor member, and there's an annual fee associated with that, then we will give you what we call the 3 and 3 plan, 3 months and 3 months and 3 weeks. So for 3 months, let's say there's another COVID lockdown. Well, you come out here because you're a member at that level. We have a cleared spot for you. We have a bunch of water here. We've got 2 wells. We've got an abundance of water. We've got food we're growing, so you can help us grow food. So it's basically like, if your uncle had a big piece of property and he said to your whole family, hey, if any shit goes down, just come out here. And you're like, well, what am I going to, well, bring your RV and we'll figure it out. Well, that's kind of the plan here. Yeah. Bring your RV. We got a spot for you. You're in the same value system as we are because you looked at that beforehand. You paid us money for this annual membership, and we've got a spot for you for 3 months. Well, after 3 months, it basically goes to $500 a month to continue. And the 3 weeks is really cool because if nothing's going on and the economy stays intact and there's no World War III and everything's good like it's been for the last few years, you can still come out here for 3 weeks a year and just camp and hang out, help us build a fence or whatever. And
be around like-minded people.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Get to know us. We kind of hang out with you. You hang out with us. And maybe you'll be like, hey, this is really cool. I just want to be here full time. What does that take? Then we can engage in that level of conversation.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to look at more of that, you can check it out at safeharbor.voluntaria.community. That's safeharbor.voluntaria.community. You can go through the full purchase process, and the contract is online there.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive write-up about what that all entails, and it's really cool. And as far as we know, we have not heard of anyone else having any kind of product like that, where you basically are outsourcing your plan B if the shit hits the fan in any way, shape, or form. You got a place to go. What's that worth?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So this is the first kind of thing that I've heard from people doing this kind of thing, that you're offering something like that. And what you guys have been talking about too, the importance of entrepreneurship in this whole thing, and people that want to get involved. Like, helping figure out some kind of way to that they can do something entrepreneurial. So is it part of it that if anybody's entering into the community, they need to have they have to have like their own source of income in whatever way, or can there be like an income derived from the property if they join or whatever?
I would say that's probably under discussion right now. We've done some experiments now where we've had people trade their time for value, and I would say with mixed results, mostly positive. Chad, would you agree?
Yeah. The problem with that is it's like so many things in life, right? It starts off with a bang and everybody's doing great, and then it just people get used to it, and then they don't appreciate what you're doing for them anymore, and then all of a sudden what they're getting from the community doesn't seem to have much value because, well, it's always there, and yeah, I got a place to live, and so then it just kind of wanes. Their participation seems to wane on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think this is one area where I subscribe to the idea that, I mean, money and currency, I would define them slightly differently. Most people kind of conflate them in their minds. But one of the interesting things that I've come to understand in my study of cryptocurrency and money and currency and value is I believe from a very spiritual perspective that currency and money does not want to sit. It doesn't want to just sit anywhere. Value doesn't want to sit. Nature abhors a void. Still water becomes stagnant. Flowing water is life. And that's the kind of the metaphor that I'm hoping to emulate with the exchange of value that we are trying to create. We want a continuous flow, and if there's not a regular commitment of some sort of currency, then I think that the relationship becomes stagnant. And I think that if you apply that spiritually, like if you say that, I mean, the number one spiritual currency is time, I believe. It's the only thing that we don't know what the balance is, and yet we can spend and waste it on things, or we can spend it wisely on things. And I believe that this is an example of good time well spent if we're trying to get our message out there. It's aligned with our goals, and we want to invoke that within the community in such a way where there can be some kind of reciprocal exchange. And basically what that means is currency doesn't have to be dollars. That just happens to be the easiest technology that man has available to us. We can do crypto. We've done crypto. We've done dollars. We've done trades of time with many people, but it's difficult to value time equally.
Right.
A plumber's hand. A plumber's half day is not the same as a drunk's tree fort.
Or if you have an issue with your plumbing and you want to get it resolved, like the plumber is like super valuable.
Right.
I'll pay whatever to that plumber to get my thing resolved.
Exactly. And so there's contextual things that can increase or decrease the value of any individual's time. And so that's where it's, I think, almost better to dissociate people's time from the value and just work with things that are valuable in some kind of market. For instance, I might do website work. Website work can be valued, and there is a market for website work, and I can allocate my website work time to Voluntaria or to external clients. And so, that might be one way that we value an individual's contributions. Chad's on the site doing project management, facilitating and coordinating, organizing day-to-day meetings. He's wearing a number of hats on the site, and at the same time building culture, building community, doing outreach on his own. And there's like a whole slew of different kinds of jobs and roles that is that can be valued in a marketplace, right? So those are the kinds of things. But if you're showing up and I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, I won't use names, but all you're doing is selling coconuts, and there's no market for coconuts. It's very difficult to value that, your
Right.
coconut collection and harvesting and sales, especially if you're not sharing the proceeds of those coconuts with the community. If you're just living on the land and conducting personal activity that is entrepreneurial, which we would support. You're using the resource of our land for your residents, and we're not really getting anything out of it unless you're contributing directly to the community in some way.
Okay. Yeah.
So those are the kinds of conversations that we would have in the contractual agreements that we would strike on an individual basis with every person. And then we have clear expectations, privileges, and commitments for each membership level that gets you more and more access to resources. And the main thing is more and more access to decision-making power within the community.
So being on Joel's farm and get at Exxon Build there, and seeing the way that he operates, did you guys get any inspiration from what Joel is doing out there on his farm and how they have the farm operating? Did any of that maybe you got some ideas from going out there?
Well, a lot of what he was doing revolved around animals and animal husbandry and stuff like that. But he was amazing. I mean, the way that he handled capturing the water. Did you go on that farm tour?
I didn't know.
Yeah. He talked about the ponds and how they collected the rainwater and they put little speed bumps on the roads and it just funneled into. I mean, the guy is just next level when it comes to doing things that make sense. So. Yeah, although we don't have nearly the land that he has, there was a lot of good stuff there. But
well, it was really interesting, especially when you guys are talking about new people coming in. I thought it was interesting how they bring in their interns that come and work on the farm.
Yeah,
and they kind of go through that trial process. I don't know. I guess if anybody were to come and want to join long term, would they get some kind of a trial period, basically?
Yeah, we have all kinds of options like that. One thing we're about ready to do, and I've looked into it a bit, I haven't finished yet, but is to do something like a workaway, where we post an ad out there. And I mean, we could use all kinds of construction help right now. We could use all kinds of farming help, food forest kind of stuff. And we have this, what used to be a pole barn. We've got concrete poured now, but we need to wall it in and do some electrical. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. If somebody wanted to turn up with their RV and just camp it here, the workaway deal is you work, 4-ish hours per day for 4 or 5 days a week. And then the host feeds you, and then you have a lot of free time as well. So we're happy to engage in a conversation like that and get some help out here. And if the person really likes our principles and they like what we're doing, I mean, that's all the better. We'd really like to find kindred spirits in that regard. So there's all kinds of options. Just tell us what your skill set is and what you want, and we'll have a conversation. We're happy to have people come out, check it out, see if it's for them on maybe 2 weeks to a month kind of thing, or even a couple months if things are going really well. And yeah, we'd love to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and I will say that I think one of the things that we haven't specifically discussed, but one of my expectations is that anybody who's inducted as an official member, ultimately that would be a consensus team decision. And so that would be essentially, somebody would propose, hey, I want to make this person an official member. That's when we would evaluate how well aligned they have been with the principles. Did they meet the financial contribution requirements for the level that they're seeking? Are there any consensus members who are in disagreement or out of favor with that person? One of the stipulations that we actually have in print on the website is that you will maintain positive relations with at least 2 in good standing members as a Voluntaria member. So if you piss everybody off, there's grounds right there for getting kicked out of the property. And I want to say we're pretty rigid on that, because everything is opt-in, everything is voluntary. So when you fork over, let's say your $1,000 for level 1 membership, which grants you a minimum of 3 months of temporary guest residency annually, with negotiated rates following that, then you. But if you violate that, or if you break that, if you haven't fulfilled that $1,000 is not, it's not refundable. This isn't a product that you're buying with us. It's a commitment that you're demonstrating with value. And we also have in there that $1,000 doesn't have to be $1,000. It could be 1 Ethereum. It could be 50 hours of your highly skilled construction time. But we're going to measure that by things that have been delivered, to the community. So those are things that the consensus team fills in the gaps of every hole that could be punched. So if anybody ever says, well, yeah, but what about consensus team? Well, what if we consensus team? But what happens when consensus team? That's it.
Okay. So you guys mentioned, in the beginning there, or pre-show before we got started, is why, you mentioned the 90% of intentional communities fail within the first 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
we got one out of the way. So we one failure, right? So this is our second attempt. Hopefully it's better than 90% odds now.
Yeah. And I guess if you never try anything too, like, you never get to learn the lessons. So, Chad, I know, so you said that you've lived in a few of these communities, and you think that the big takeaway is, like, not everybody is in agreement on some core underlying values and principles is kind of one of the things that cause things to kind of go apart.
Yeah, I mean, that was my problem. I was not in alignment with their core values, and I left because of it. And just to be clear, I've lived in one for about 2 years.
Okay.
And it was great. They taught some courses. That was their product. And there was about 80 people that lived there in 2 different locations. And it was great. I'm super glad I lived there, and I learned a lot from them, and my hat's off to them. And then, when it didn't work, because I basically became a voluntarist and walked away from the whole political craziness. What was your question in there somewhere?
Of the guiding principles being the thing that can, what are some of those lessons learned, I guess, from I think those other intentional communities?
I think
one that you were involved with.
Yeah, I think the principles that we have, I mean, if you actually just take the 5 minutes to read them, we have yet to have anyone bicker with any of them. They're just solid. They're great. It's do unto others kind of thing, do no harm, resolve disputes honorably, all this kind of stuff. Like, who's going to argue with that? And the community that I lived at, they didn't have any of those. There was basically like these unwritten rules that everybody just kind of knew. So I don't think that worked very well. And I also don't think putting the community first above the individual worked very well. I mean, if you are here and you've really, it's not day one, you've demonstrated that you're in it, you align with our values, and you're having a hard time, you lost your job or whatever, well, we'll help you. We'll help you as long as you're helping yourself. We're here to help you as well get back on your feet, because you as an individual need to be, you need to have your income sorted. You need to have your close personal, let's call it spouse relationship, sorted, so that you're not fighting all the time. Like, all these are like basic things. That's like the 0 line, like you're doing pretty well in life. But if you dip below it for a bit, it's not like you have to leave or we're going to kick you out. We're going to help you. but we want to see you get back up to zero to where you're not struggling with all this stuff again, and then you can help and you can give back and you can cook for everybody one day, or you're working in the garden again, something that's going to benefit the community. It's great, but not at your personal expense, right? That's the big difference. Where they would take it. They would take whatever time you would give them, even if it was detrimental to you or you had something you needed to sort out yourself. So we've been very upfront about that. And at the same time, like Chuck said earlier, we're not looking to rescue people and solve all your problems. We want people here that, pretty much have their shit together, and they want to hang out with people that have their shit together, and they all want to go up together and build a better world and build a better culture.
Yeah, I want to be careful with that too, because while Chad is correct, that is the desired. I think we also need to acknowledge that it's, the average look. The Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that the bottom 20% of people overestimate their capabilities.
Yeah.
But the top 20% of people underestimate their capabilities.
Yeah.
And I think when that top 20% hears "have your shit together," they take it seriously, and they're never going to believe that they've got their shit together, because there's always something that can be done. So to those people, I want to say, have some faith in yourself. If you're interested in doing the self-improvement and doing the work, and you're ideally already doing it, well, you're probably already aligned. And even if you don't think so yourself, you probably are. But there is a contingency of people out there, I'm sure we all have had them in our lives, who are the combination of arrogant and stupid that I cannot abide,
Yeah.
and are typically a drain on any community or organization or family, and tend to be ostracized and kept at arm's length.
Right.
Not something that we want to invite into our community anymore.
Well, speaking, so you have your community. How do you want to integrate with the other outer community around you, like foster good relationships with those other people that are around you, or you guys kind of like trying to do your own thing and be off here doing your thing?
Yeah, I'll let Chad jump in here.
Yeah, I think to the degree that we're in alignment, right, we're probably not going to go down to the public school here and say, how are you guys doing your stuff? Like, we're going to learn from you. Like, that's probably not going to happen. But Wayne, our good friend Wayne, who's helping us a lot with Food Forest and all kinds of stuff, he's put on the peace festivals here. I just talked to him today, and he just went to a Crescent City meeting with a couple movers and shakers there. And this is a small town. There's like 1,600 people here. We're basically halfway between Orlando and Jacksonville. It's an hour and a half each way to either one of those cities, and it's 45 minutes to St. Augustine. So we're actually in a really good place. You can take 45 minutes to go to a real decent restaurant or something like that. So we're kind of in the boonies, 1,600 people. But Wayne went down there and went to this whole meeting with this guy who's a realtor by day, but his whole thing is to like build Crescent City into something. And Wayne's pretty convinced it's up and coming, and it's really gonna move and shake. And there's a big like Bass Pro Shops, or what's the other one that's like those guys? They bought like 1,000 acres,
like Cabela's or something,
like Dick's Sporting Academy Sports.
Yeah, one of those big ones. Bought like 1,000 acres, and they are planning this massive like fishing excursion camp thing. That's like,
I thought it was Bass Pro Shops. I thought I'd heard about that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's Bass Pro Shops, and so that's going to be huge. That's going to bring a lot of stuff into the area. So anyway, Wayne is great at networking and stuff. I like to think I'm good, and then I hang out with Wayne and I realize how good he is. And so he did that just today. Hung out with this guy for like an hour and came up with all the stuff that's going on in town that we're getting involved in. So, when it's a match, we're all over it. But when it's, public school system or something like that, it's like, no.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that, personally, I've met at least one or two of the sheriffs, And it's interesting because Crescent City in particular has had its police force voted out. Essentially, they were defunded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of those rare instances. I mean, I think there was. I don't know the whole story. I haven't looked it up, but I think that there, from what I've heard from several residents who were in the know, that there was some mismanagement or perhaps fraud involved with some funds being spent on things that weren't appropriated correctly, and that was like, and that on top of some reports of corruption and bullying caused the city council essentially to disband or defund the police. So there's only sheriffs there. And my understanding of the difference between like police forces and sheriffs is sheriffs are um, bound to protect the Constitution and the residents of residents' properties, basically. So they take trespassing very seriously and so on and so forth, which is, I think, very good in our case. So um, we're unlikely to be harassed by police and very likely to be supported and protected by sheriffs, which I like in terms of like connection with the community. It is a
Yeah.
small community, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity to continue to outreach locally.
Yeah.
We're not opposed to people engaging, but small town, a lot of people probably grew up in those areas. I think it's rare to find. I mean, it's just rare generally to find people who align with the principles in the way that they are. But that I think would attract a certain number of people. There are residents who are very deeply engaged with us, who, as they discover us, are very happy to have like found a group or some community that they can talk to about the real stuff, that
Yeah.
they haven't been able to talk to at their mandatory vaccinated workplace,
Right. Right.
There was I don't think I told you this, Chuck. There was a guy that showed up just the other day. He came to the open house thing we had 3 weeks ago or whenever it was. And he and his friend, I don't think they're dating, but his longtime friend, they both lived in the area for a long time. He shows up. He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I lost that flyer you gave me, and I really wanted to connect with you guys because we can't stop talking about what you're doing out here." And it's like, we don't need a place to live. We just live 10 minutes down the road. He goes, and he just starts listing off everything that he's ever done. He's like, "I've done home construction stuff. I'm doing that now. And I'm a welder and I'm a this." And he's like, "If there's anything you need," he's like, "we've got all these connections at these supply houses. So he's like, if you need to buy a bunch of material, we can get it for you. And then you won't have to pay, the exorbitant fee on it, whatever." And it's going on and on and on because he loved what we're doing. So he's coming over this week, and we're just going to talk about, how he can, or we're just going to invite him to every campfire gathering we have, because the dude is starving for a community.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the need that we're trying to fill. And I feel like most people don't understand the level of invitation that we have to partner with people in their dream. It's because most people, like, we've been conditioned to buy products off the shelf or buy services off the shelf. Even with memberships, it's, I get this, I pay this. I can go to the lodge, I can go to the meetings, I can get the discount access, whatever, da 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 da. All that's true, but there's I think, a very spiritual but non-religious aspect to this that is like, I look at contracts as sacred documents, as sacred artifacts that are a commitment between two souls to do, at least two souls to do a thing. And this aligns with, I'm not Christian anymore, but I have studied the Bible very deeply, and there's, wherever two or more are gathered in my name. We believe that the Voluntaria principles aim at something higher, and that's I think the difference between some of the failed communities that we've heard about and experienced and our community is, a lot of the other communities, it's like there's a tyrannical structure, or it's my way or the highway, or they do democracy and they vote, and those don't seem to work at this level. I think we at the tribal level, you have to have a consensus that cares about the tribe. That's why we're operating this way. So there's going to be, I think, some education and some inherent like mismatches between the minds of the community that we're operating within, and we might use words in certain ways within our culture that would be more loosely used or less rigidly used outside of our community that could cause miscommunication. So I think it's important for us to follow be integrous and communicate clearly principle number 4 with the outer community. And I do want to invite relationships and entrepreneurial commitments. And, I would love to see us selling our tomatoes to the local restaurants and mushrooms and, whatever else we do entrepreneurial to create that reciprocal relationship, for sure.
There's so much that could be done here. There's a guy that I know that's really knocking it out of the park selling lion's mane and oyster mushrooms. And he's like totally willing to help us and talk to us and everything. It's just, I don't really have the time at this point, or, it's probably about 10 plus grand worth of stuff to really do a nice build out like he has. But, if someone shows up and says, hey, I've got some experience with this, I've got some money to throw down, I mean, we're happy to talk to people about partnering on that. I mean, we've obviously got the land and the water that could be used for something like that. But the big thing with that is you're starting a business. Now you need to go find your customers. It's great if you can pump out, hundreds or thousands of pounds of mushrooms, but if you're not selling them, then you kind of doesn't really work.
Yeah, you need that local community to start building, the market locally for people that are looking for that, local food. And I do think that is really critical, right? Is like that's like one of the ways that we're really controlled is through the food. And like, is that a pretty big component of what you guys are working on out there?
Yeah, we've got a good start on it right now. In fact, I posted a video today. Wayne was over and we harvested a spaghetti. I don't know if you saw this one, Chuck. We harvested a spaghetti squash from the garden right over there, and we cooked it and we ate it.
Nice.
And it was like the first, other than like a tomato here and there.
First fruits.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. Like, wow, this just came out of here.
How big was it? Like,
it was not quite as big as the one in grocery store are pretty big. It was
nice.
About 3/4 the size of a normal one in the grocery store.
That's awesome.
Every bit is good, So yeah, we are doing that. But I got to tell you, Greg, maybe doing some gardening stuff.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work. It is.
Yeah, it is
work. I can't believe it. I mean, Wayne and I shoveled a whole bunch of mulch we got for free by a local tree company. And just moving the pile from where they could dump the truck to where we wanted it, like, it's a lot of freaking work, man.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll say a food forest and a garden is a high priority because, you get 3 growing seasons in Florida, 4 if you have a greenhouse, and that can support, a certain number of people, and being able to self-sustain is a long-term goal. So I'm really happy and proud to be starting at that level. But I will say we also have a backlog of projects, of entrepreneurial ideas and things that we would love to pursue that, some half started, some unbegun projects that we could, if somebody's matched with us on their values, all we need to do is find out what skills they have and we can put them on a project. We've got a lot of things, and they can be owners again. Like, we're willing to give domains of ownership and over resource and leverage our resources, and we will invest our time and energy and potentially money if somebody's committed to, for instance, progressing the mushroom grow project.
Yeah, and I think so the conferences that I've been to, I've stayed in touch with some of the folks going to all the conferences and everything, and some of the conversations we have is about like, I'm in the city. I don't know how much longer everything's going to be cool here, So they're reaching out and talking about like, what are some other alternatives? Like, what do you have going on? What's going on right now? And so that's a big thing that is on a lot of people's minds is like, yeah, what's my plan B kind of thing. So I like what you guys have to offer there is where people have
like,
that option.
Yeah, sounds like they need a safe harbor membership.
Yes.
Could be an
yes.
option. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. So guys, thank you so much for taking the time out. If you would like to let everybody know like how people can learn more about Voluntaria, if they have any questions, how can they reach out to you guys? Where can they find all your information?
Yeah, it's all on the website, voluntaria.community. So the community is a domain name extension that doesn't get used much, but it really works well for us. So just go to www.voluntaria.community. The other thing I wanted to say briefly is, we're all about freedom. We like Larkin Rose's work. We like Mark Passio's stuff. We're Milton Friedman. I mean, we're all about the voluntarist way of being, and also we're very health oriented. There's a lot of us here that are, we're reading labels and we're looking at stuff, and there's a contingent that are, vegan-ish, and that's not mandatory by any stretch. There's a group of us that
we value diet, more than the average American, let's say. But I want to throw out there also, before we get off how to get in touch with us, if you go to the website and click the contact us link, there's also a Voluntaria general chat channel
on Telegram.
So there's a Telegram channel that we monitor pretty much 24/7. I mean, among the three of us with reason, but it's a pretty active group, and if anybody has any questions, we'll respond to them live, either via DM or publicly, whichever they prefer.
And there's also there's an email link there. They can email me directly off there as well. So what I wanted to mention is we're all about freedom. We're all about health, or at least a lot of us are, and the health conversation happens a lot. And then the other thing we're about is, the spiritual conversation, where we consider ourselves like spiritual but not religious. I myself am very much into like Eastern kind of philosophy, and I love that stuff. I love talking about the nature of reality, and what is this thing we're in? Is it an illusion? Is it a hologram? Is it a video game? I can talk your ear off about that stuff. So so those are the three things that I think we like to see people align on: is freedom, health, and the spiritual but not religious kind of thing.
Okay.
That's not to say you can't come here if you are, like,
if you're misaligned with any of those,
if you're a diehard Christian, we'll find some common ground. But just as far as what we're putting out there, it's like, hey, this is kind of how we do it. You won't find people here really that are eating at McDonald's, for example. We kind of like cringe on that, and the vast majority of us have not been vaccinated. We don't think that's a good thing for your health long term. So just to give people a little bit more idea of like what they're walking into.
Right. Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, unless you guys have some more closing remarks, I really appreciate you guys. I'll throw it up to you if you guys want to leave everybody with some closing statements about where you see the future, where you want to see the future going, and how people might be able to charge that pathway that they're looking to do.
You want to go first, or Chad, or should I?
You can go first, and then I'll wrap it up. I've definitely got something to say.
Well, thanks again, Greg, for coordinating this and arranging this. I very much appreciate it. To the people out there, we acknowledge we are not perfect. We are not millionaires. We are a group of freedom-loving, spiritual, questioning people who are very much interested in connecting authentically, and we're trying to provide a home for those of us who align to do that. And if you're there in your mind, connect with us, and we'll meet you halfway, or ideally at Voluntaria. So come on and join us.
All right.
And one thing I'd like to say is we don't think it's doom and gloom. I mean, there's so much going on now in the world, and it's crazy. But I much prefer to look at what we're doing, getting off the grid, so to speak, growing our own food, doing our own thing. It's not like we're doing that because the world's going to fall apart and, oh my God, the government's crazy, which it's all true. But it's more from a standpoint of let's just be prepared. Like if you live in Florida, you typically have some rations around because, well, hurricanes happen from time to time. You're not a crazy lunatic trying to bring on hurricanes in your reality by having some extra cans of beans laying around, right? So I like to look at it as we're just prepared Boy Scouts, so to speak, with our relationship to what's going on out there. Like there may be a storm at any point, but we're not crazy conspiracy theorists that are totally black-pilled and think everything's going to go down the shitter next week. That's not it at all. It's like even if everything was perfect, we would still be doing this because it just makes sense to grow your own food. It makes sense to hang out with cool people. It makes sense to get off the grid. Like, why do you want to participate in that? I mean, I lived nearby cities and I didn't like it much. This is so much better. There's 52 acres. It takes me about an hour to walk all the paths we have here, and I do it almost every morning with my dog. It's beautiful. Why would I want to be anywhere else? So we're not trying to escape from it all, as we're just saying, hey, how do we want to live and how would it be nicer to live? Okay, great. Let's do that. And let's find the people that want to do that too.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. Hang out with me after we end here, and make sure to get all the information to keep in the video description. And folks, thank you for watching, and make sure if you got some value out of this, please share it with somebody that would get value out of this, and like and subscribe on the channel, and leave me a comment about what you guys think about community and how we can work together a lot better in the conversation. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate you guys, Chuck and Chad, for coming on and spending time with me to talk about Voluntaria.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.